Hey guys, Nicole here with Obscure Reptiles and Caging, and today we're going to be talking about picky ball pythons and how to get them eating. So let's get started. So right now I have out one of our females. This is from Bob's Balls. She is a banana, pinstripe, black pastel, mahogany, yellow belly. So she's actually not a picky eater, but a lot of our picky eaters right now are going through brumation, so I'm trying not to mess with them. She's definitely not, on the ravenous side. So normally when it comes to ball pythons, you have snakes that are in the middle, like this little girl. You have ones that will never miss a meal, and you have those really picky snakes. So if you have a snake that's picky, we're going to go over the main reasons why that would be. So the first thing I'm going to mention is ball pythons do go through a thing called brumation. Now, brumation is for older snakes. Like, for example, she will not go through brumation. If it was a male this size, maybe, but generally it's when they're 2 or 3 years old and they're actually breeding size. So for a female, minimum, that's 1,500 grams. She's only around 500, maybe 600 grams. So she will not be going through brumation. So if she stops eating right now in winter, then it's something other than that. But if you have a full-grown adult and it's gone on brumation, that means they've stopped eating. It's kind of like hibernation, but they're still going to be active. Normally it's for older females, that especially if they've laid eggs, or if they're big enough to lay eggs, and for males, especially if they can smell a female. If a ball python goes into brumation and they were a nice healthy size before it, there's nothing to worry about. Brumation generally starts in the winter months and it can last 3 to 6 months. It's different for every snake. So if the animal goes off food in the winter months, it's an adult breeding size or one that has bred in the past, it's not really losing weight, then don't worry about it too much. Let's say it's like the middle of summertime, you have an adult, it went through brumation, and for some reason it's just not eating. Generally, it's one of just a few things. The number one thing I find people are normally lacking on is their habitat. So that can be anything from the type of enclosure, the size of enclosure, the temperature, and humidity. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that all of the criteria is met for a perfect house for a ball python. So a lot of times that means you're going to want something like, you can do rack systems, you can do PVC enclosures, you can do sterlite bins like the ones behind me. I would not recommend glass tanks. If your ball python is in a glass tank, it could thrive, but generally they don't. So make sure you have the proper enclosure. We've got videos showing you guys and talking all in depth on that type of stuff. But number one, make sure it's the right enclosure. Also make sure it's the right size enclosure. If you get too big of a cage too quickly as these ball pythons age, they tend to not want to eat. Or you can get picky babies or even picky adults, sub-adults, all that type of stuff. We also have an entire video showing you guys what size bin we recommend for each weight and age for a ball python. It looks like this if you guys are interested in watching that. But a lot of times when people contact me and show me their enclosures, they've got a huge cage and a small snake. That could be the reason that you guys are having issues. Another thing is temperature and humidity. You have to make sure you have the proper humidity, the proper hot spot, and proper cold spot. If it's just a few degrees too hot or too cold, the animal will not be able to digest its food, so it will not eat for you. So make sure the hot spot's hot enough, the cold side isn't too cold. Make sure your humidity is holding good. Another negative of glass tanks is holding proper heat and humidity can be very difficult. So just make sure you have the proper setup and all those things are perfectly correct. If you don't know exactly what temperatures, humidities, here's a good guide that we did for you guys that goes completely in depth with all of care. Now let's say you know for a fact you have a temperature gun, you've checked your hot spot, cold spot, and everything is set up properly. Does that snake have hides in there? Is there places that animal can go? Like, for example, I don't personally like darker bins like this because I like to see the animal, but it's better for them. So that's what we use for our adults. Babies, they have hides, they have water dishes that also work as hides, and they're in the back of the room that don't really get bothered too much, so those guys normally do pretty well back there. So that's all part of their having a proper habitat. The next thing is, are you keeping that enclosure very clean? It can be very difficult when you have a small baby like those guys. They go to the bathroom once, and because they're on paper towels, it really spreads. So you've got to clean them every day, or at least check them every day to make sure they're clean. If they're in a dirty enclosure, even if they've only just gone and you've cleaned it up and then you try feeding them the next day, they might not be comfortable because it was just dirty, so they might not want to eat for you. So make sure whether it's a small bin, large one, PVC enclosure, whatever you have, you're keeping up with cleaning, because if their enclosure is dirty, a lot of times they're not going to want to eat. Now, the next reason your animal could not be eating for you is because they're stressed. They could be stressed because they don't have enough hides, because their enclosure is dirty, but they can also be stressed because you're holding them too much. Ball pythons, some of them you can handle every day, they'll eat consistently, and they're totally fine with that. Other ball pythons, you can hold them once every week or two, and that's just about all that they can tolerate, or you can stress them out by bringing them out too often. If your snake is not eating for you and you're taking it out a lot, try to limit it until you have them eating. If you've got them eating again, you start holding them often and they stop eating, that's a really good sign that your animal is stressed out by coming out too often. Again, some snakes you could take out all the time, but some of them get very stressed from coming out, so you only want to do it a small amount of time here and there. Another big thing is ball pythons are actually creatures of habit. They like the same thing all the time, so if you mix that thing up, then sometimes they don't want to eat. So for example, if we have a smaller bin, like these ones are closer to a 28 quart size, and these ones are more equivalent to a 41 quart size. As females, for example, get larger, you upgrade them to a bigger enclosure. Some do great and they love the space, they do awesome, they eat for you right when you try to feed them next. But for example, we have a female over here. Every time we go to upgrade her, she refuses to eat for us, so she is a pretty big snake in a smaller 28 equivalent size container, because every time she switches, she just doesn't like it. So you have to kind of be flexible with maybe your animal doesn't want to be upgraded. Maybe your animal prefers a certain location. I've had ball pythons where in one rack they were down low, but we moved them up higher, and then they didn't want to eat, so we actually switched them a little bit lower, so the temperature is a little bit cooler compared to up top, and they do really well. Ball pythons are known for being picky, especially picky eaters. So sometimes you have to realize that you're going to have to tweak little things. Even if it doesn't seem like a lot to us, it might mean a lot to them. Also, if you always, let's say you feed on Sundays and you get a new job, you decide to switch it always to Tuesdays, that might not really be a big deal. But for example, if you switch where you're getting your animals from and those rats smell completely different, you're going from mice to ASF, or you're switching sizes, especially a drastic size for your animal, that may stress them out. If you give them something too large, it may scare them and they might not eat. They are predators, but they're very picky predators. So I have a lot of females who just want a small rat, and we feed them weekly instead of giving them, a medium every 10 days. If you are trying, for example, to switch from live to frozen thawed, some animals will take that and some will not. I would not recommend starving your snake. I wouldn't say just keep trying until it takes it. Some will never switch. I have some that are very set in their ways of they want a frozen mice, they want a live rat, they want what they want. So a lot of that comes from what they are started out with. So as a general rule, I don't purchase babies unless they are started on rats. I don't have mice, I don't have easy access to them, so I start all of my babies on rats. Generally, if you can get your snake to eat a rat, it will eat a mouse, it'll eat an ASF, it'll eat anything. But especially if you get a brand new baby home and it's only on mice, you've only fed it mice, now it's too big for mice and you try switching it to rats and it won't switch, that's going to be very difficult for you. Some, again, will, but some will not. So another good thing is see what that animal was eating or know what that animal was eating before you've purchased. The age of the animal, again, is going to play a really key role in why your animal's not eating. So if you have a brand new baby ball python and you just got it from a breeder and they said it's had 4 meals and you have it and you've had it for 2 months and it hasn't had any meals, depending on the size that animal started, depending on the size the animal is now, you may have to do things like assist feeding or force feeding. Both are not fun to do. We've made a video just to be able to show you guys for educational purposes, but it's not something that I ever recommend unless, for example, it's an emergency. But when it comes to older snakes, something like the banana combo I was just holding or even larger, I would never force feed. They will eat, they know how to eat, but something is making them not eat. So it's my job to figure out if I've switched things around, try a different food, try it at a different time, or something's wrong with its habitat. That's on me. If it's a brand new baby and it's never eaten for you, normally that falls back on the habitat that they're in, how you're caring for them, and if they actually did eat and the breeder you got them from or the pet store you got them from was being honest. What normally helps is these guys like to have a pattern. So for example, when I go to feed my snakes, I feed everyone at the same time. That way they can all smell it. They know it's in the air. When I'm, for example, defrosting some rats and mice for them, I'll actually let them defrost in the room. That way that everyone can kind of smell it. And I almost always start on the same side, work my way over, so everyone kind of knows when the food's incoming. Once you have your animal set up a certain way and they're thriving, I do not recommend changing it. For example, Some of my snakes have hides because they've always been more shy. I will not remove that hide unless they become very confident, very good eaters, and they're a lot older. If they're more timid snakes, I will never take their hide away or their water. I don't switch around their water dishes. Everyone gets their own certain water dish. Everyone gets their own certain hide. That way, one, there's no cross-contamination of any snakes, and two, that way that animal is completely comfortable. They know their surroundings. I put their hides back the same way in every bin. That way everything is very consistent for them. Generally, they really like that. Now, the biggest thing is, has that snake always been picky? So sometimes you will get a baby. For example, let's say I have a pastel clown from this season. She's a keeper of mine, and she's always been super picky. She only wants to eat every other meal. She started out with force feeding, then had to go to assist feeding, and now she's still very picky, very iffy. I know everything is set up with her. I know everything is fine. I know everything is correct. The temperature, cage, everything is correct. But she already is showing signs of being picky from day one, and she's only about 5 months old. So as she ages and grows, chances are she could continue to be picky. So sometimes you will see people post, picky babies, took a long time to start, but they're going now. Some snakes start out really slow and kind of get the hang of it as they age, and from there they can be great snakes. They can be, they'll eat every single meal and they don't skip any. But sometimes if they are hard to start out, they stay that way their whole life. That doesn't mean that they are a bad snake. That just might mean if, for example, you're looking for a pet, that's perfect, but that animal might not be the best breeder, especially if it's a female and you're going to be putting a lot of stress on it with having eggs and doing everything that's required for breeding. And even for a male, because they go off food for so long when they are breeding some seasons, I really wouldn't recommend that as a breeder, but it can still be an awesome pet. Now, if you've gone through all of this list and none of this applies to you, but your animal's still not eating, you might want to be checking for a few signs. Maybe your animal's actually sick. So, for example, if it has like a respiratory infection, if you see it with its mouth open, it's kind of wheezing, or it's got any kind of bubbles forming, yawning a lot with a lot of slime in its mouth, you might actually be looking at something that's more of an illness, and that's why the animal's not eating. There are diseases out there that affect ball pythons. There are external parasites, there are internal parasites. The snake could have a whole bunch of health issues. So if you see your animal is not acting quite right, I would recommend taking it to a vet right away and just tell them it's not eating, any symptoms that it could be showing, and just make sure that animal is checked out by a vet. I hope this video helps you guys out. If you have any questions, you can put them in the comments below. If you haven't already, please subscribe. We do new videos every Wednesday, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday.